in finding the domain of a function, the first thing you need to be able to answer is, well, what is the domain? What does that mean? The domain is all the allowable inputs. Allowable meaning that what you're allowed to plug in. Allowable inputs. So if we're thinking about the definition of a function, a function is for every input, there's exactly one output. So a rule that assigns to each input exactly one output. So if we put any number in, sometimes we don't get anything out. Well, those are not the allowable inputs. So to boil it down to two things to focus on, focus first on, are there any fractions in the function rule? Well, here we do have a fraction. Well, yes, we do. And so what do we have to focus on there? Well, we know we can't divide by 0. Division by 0 is undefined. So if there are any inputs that would cause the denominator to be 0, then we have to eliminate those. So we say that z minus 2 is not allowed to be 0. That's the denominator. And so therefore, we have to remove 2 from our set of all real numbers possibilities of allowable real numbers to plug in for z. So first of all, we've identified that z is not allowed to be 2. The next thing we want to look for, are there any square roots? Okay, well, yes, we do also have a square root. And so the square root being z plus 3, well, z plus 3, what's under the square root, has to be non-negative because you're not allowed to take the square root of a negative number. And so therefore, we set up an inequality. We say z plus 3 has to be greater than or equal to 0. And then when we subtract 3 from both sides and solve for z, we say, well, z has to be greater than or equal to negative 3. And so we have our domain. We are only allowed to replace z with with real numbers that are greater than or equal to negative 3, but not 2. And so we can use an interval notation to talk about that, to show the domain. Negative 3 all the way to 2, not including 2, and then all the real numbers from 2 to infinity. So that is the interval notation for the domain of this function. And then the graphing notation, if you think back to Algebra 2, we did a lot of that, from negative 3, and including negative 3, shading in everything all the way to 2, but an open circle at 2, and then shading everything to the right of 2. Everything meaning real numbers. So the bottom line is, the domain of this function is all real numbers greater than or equal to 3 except for 2.